Lake Michigan is one of the largest and most mysterious freshwater lakes in the United States. And now, deep inside it, scientists have stumbled upon something unexplainable. Vast, round craters scattered all across the lake's floor. It all started in 2022. A team of researchers wanted to map the lake's bottom and look for some shipwrecks. At first, they were sure it's going to be just some typical rocky terrain or sandy patches. But what they saw on their sonar screens stopped them cold. Strange, circular shapes that looked almost too perfect to be natural. They were hiding about 500 feet beneath the surface, in places where the water turns dark and impenetrable. Those guys are huge, ranging from 300 to 600 feet wide. They also plunge nearly 40 feet deep. And there are dozens of them, neatly arranged like some footprints. But the team had no idea what these things were. Then, in August 2024, the mystery only deepened. Using a remotely operated vehicle, they got a closer look at these formations. There were about 40 of them. No one had ever seen anything quite like this before in the Great Lakes. What could have created those craters? Could they be ancient? Perhaps remnants of some geological event lost to time? If that's the case, it's weird how long these holes have likely been sitting there, undisturbed. Theories started popping up. One possibility was that they could be sinkholes, or dolines. Those are basically holes that suddenly appear in the ground when the surface layer collapses. The rock beneath the surface, often made of limestone, gets slowly dissolved by water over time, creating voids underground. When the surface of those voids can no longer hold its own weight, it caves in, and this forms a hole. Think of it like when you poke a straw through the lid of a drink. Sinkholes can be small dips or huge, spanning up to 2,000 feet. They can happen gradually or all at once. Sometimes they can swallow entire cars or even buildings. And Lake Michigan sits on limestone bedrock. It erodes pretty easily when water flows through it. Sinkholes like these have already been found in Lake Huron, and they look kinda similar. But there are some plot holes, no pun intended, with this theory. For example, it's wild how they all would be so huge. It's also weird and pretty rare for sinkholes to occur in a lake bed. They also kinda resemble a straight pattern. They seem to extend generally southward, forming a loose line, which is pretty weird. If these are sinkholes, then they're definitely not playing the usual geological rules. Though it might be some new, unusual process at play beneath the lake's surface that we haven't discovered yet. There's another theory though: glaciers. Glaciers are wild rivers of ice. They covered much of the Earth during the last ice age, and they're incredibly powerful. While they might move slowly, sometimes only a few inches per day, they have such immense weight that they can reshape entire landscapes over thousands of years. Glaciers can grind and scoop the land beneath them. They're basically like colossal bulldozers. Their weight, combined with the slow but steady movement, grounds down everything beneath them: rocks, soil, even bedrock. This can create deep gouges in the Earth's surface, called glacial troughs. During the last ice age, there were lots of glaciers all over the northern US, including the Great Lakes region. If they moved across what is now Lake Michigan, they could have carved out these deep holes. Glaciers often move in a pretty straight path. As they move, they cause terrain to erode, but the resulting erosion varies based on terrain. Sometimes there are places where the bedrock is softer or fractured, and these places are more easily carved and crushed by the glacier. That could explain why some holes could be bigger and deeper than others. Harder bedrock is less affected. But usually this leads to rounded, crescent-shaped depressions known as chatter marks. Those marks are more like grooves rather than circular, big craters like those in Lake Michigan. Once the glaciers melted, the Great Lakes themselves formed. If the craters were formed by them, they may have filled with water, becoming part of the Michigan Lake, Though this theory is more like a speculation, so we need more evidence. But there's another layer to this mystery. The craters are not just curious geological formations. They actually may hold valuable clues about early life on Earth. Parts of Lake Michigan, especially dark ones, are relatively low in oxygen. It's like a lighter version of deep ocean environments that often have very little of this element. For example, hydrothermal vents deep in the ocean, underwater openings in the Earth's crust with some hot, mineral-rich water that are often very low in oxygen. But some organisms love places like these. For example, opossum shrimp. Teeny tiny shrimp-like creatures that love cold, deep waters. They get their name because they have a pouch to carry their young until they're ready to be on their own, like an opossum. Or deep-water sculpin fish. Small bottom-dwelling fish that also enjoys cold lakes. They're well adapted to living in dark waters and usually stay close to the lake bed. And weird organisms like invasive quagga mussels, which kinda look like shells. These are small freshwater mussels that have spread there to the Great Lakes. They attach themselves to hard surfaces and can cause problems for ecosystems by competing with native species for food and space. All these guys could be in Lake Michigan, and even more. There might be microbes or even bacteria that are specially adapted to these harsh conditions, just like it was in Lake Huron. There's only a handful of creatures that could survive deep within these craters, and studying them could give us insight into how life once flourished in Earth's ancient, oxygen-poor oceans. That's because it's in places similar to these, where some of the earliest life forms thrived. Early Earth had an atmosphere with little oxygen, although it was much more hot, and ancient microbes adapted to this. The Great Lakes, especially Lake Michigan, have always had a bit of a ghostly reputation. Like even this mission was organized to study the shipwrecks. There were about 6,000 of them in the Great Lakes. Many of these wrecks are still sitting on the lake beds, preserved by the cold, fresh waters. And shipwrecks aren't the only strange things tied to the Great Lakes. Over the years, there have been stories of unexplained disappearances. Boats and even planes have vanished without a trace. The lakes, often calm on the surface, can suddenly turn dangerous with unpredictable storms and massive waves, leading to these mysterious events. Not even mentioning all the creepy stuff people noticed there over the centuries, such as ghostly lights above water or bizarre weather patterns like eerie, sudden fogs that seem to appear out of nowhere. In 2007, they even discovered some prehistoric structure that looks like Stonehenge there. Well, it was way smaller, but still. It lay about 40 feet below the surface in the heart of Grand Traverse Bay, and it's speculated to be about 9,000 years old, way older than Stonehenge. Looks like this is a print of those who lived in the area thousands of years ago. These massive stones are arranged in a careful, winding pattern stretching over a mile. They range in size from basketballs to compact cars. But one, in particular, stands out. A boulder 3.5 to 4 feet tall, 5 feet wide. It's etched with the image of a mastodon, a creature that roamed the Earth about 11,000 years ago before it went extinct. It probably sank there during the end of the last ice age we mentioned. This period had reshaped the region. This place is underwater now, but back in the day, it was still dry land. So the stones were probably created by people who lived there, though we're not sure why. Were they used as hunting blinds? Or was it some sort of an ancient calendar? Who knows? Only about 15% of the Great Lakes floors have been explored. Now, scientists are gearing up for a deeper dive into this mystery, both literally and figuratively. They want to analyze the lake beds surrounding the craters, hoping that maybe something in the environment around them might have caused them to appear. They have initiatives like Lakebed 2030. These missions should map the entire underwater landscape. This would help us learn tons of interesting stuff about Lake Michigan and our planet's past. Who knows what other secrets these dark waters hide? Thousands of years ago, a huge meteor weighing 2 million tons crashed into Earth at a speed of around 56,000 miles per hour. Sounds like a big deal, and it was. It actually created Lunar Lake in Maharashtra. When you see it from above, it might look like any other lake, but the sand there is magnetic, and it makes compasses go haywire. First off, it's a soda lake. Nah, it's not filled with Coke. It's just another name for an alkaline lake. The pH levels there vary from 9 to 12, whereas humans enjoy ranges from 6.5 to 8.5. So it's not really advisable to bathe there, not to mention to drink such water. There's a little round dip about 2,300 feet away from the main lake, which folks think was made by a piece of the main meteor. Near this lake, there is a Hanuman temple that has an idol carved from rock, and it's said to have some pretty strong magnetic vibes. Also, local farmers are draining water from Ambar Lake. Sometimes people refer to this lake as Chota Lunar, which means Little Lunar. This nearly perfect oval is one of only 2 natural craters in the world made entirely from basalt, a dark, finely textured volcanic rock. The water there is 7 times saltier than ocean water, and sometimes the lake can turn pink due to particular bacteria. Whenever you open up a tap to fill a glass of water, water goes from top to bottom because gravity, duh. It's hard to imagine it acting the other way around, but turns out there are many waterfalls that can defy gravity and go in the opposite direction. That's called a reverse waterfall, and it happens when super strong winds whip through a waterfall, pushing the water back up. It's especially common for those windy fall and winter months. You usually need winds of at least 46 miles per hour to see this cool trick in action. It's actually not as rare as one may think, and you can find these wild reverse waterfalls all over the globe, from Australia to India, Japan, the UK, and the US. In Australia, in areas like Sydney, the Central Coast, and Royal National Park, winds around 43 miles per hour have been known to turn waterfalls upside down. Yep, it's all about the wind going this fast. Please put aside all those weird myths about Australia being in the southern hemisphere, like the one about the water in the toilet flushing in the opposite direction. This is nothing but an urban myth. In India, near Mumbai, and in places like Sandan Valley and Amboli Hills, waterfalls get blown upward during the monsoon. And if you're ever in the Faroe Islands, you can witness this unique phenomenon happen regularly due to the region's geography and fierce winds from the North Atlantic. Magnetic Hill in Ladakh, India, is a fascinating spot, sitting at about 14,000 feet high, right along the Srinagar-Leh Highway, just 16 miles from Leh City. It's known for a quirky gravitational trick where parked cars mysteriously roll uphill when left in neutral, defying logic and catching the attention of visitors from all over. Locals have their own myths, viewing it as a path between heaven and earth. You'll want to stop by between June and September when the weather is just right and the optical illusion effect is at its peak, typically from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. In Brazil, there's this street called Rua do Amendoim that seems to defy the laws of physics, leaving many puzzled as they walk or drive down it. Locals affectionately call it Peanut Street, and there's never a shortage of parking spots. That's mainly because if a car is parked without the emergency brake, it starts to roll uphill all on its own, picking up speed as it goes. People have all sorts of wild theories about why this happens. Some say the hill is haunted, while others think there's a huge iron ore deposit beneath it pulling cars up like a magnet. But believe it or not, the truth is that this strange occurrence is just an optical illusion. The street looks steep, but it actually has a slight dip. So, while it seems like cars are rolling uphill, they're really just going downhill. Still, that hasn't stopped folks from filming countless videos of this quirky sight. Located on the beautiful Black Sea coast, Ureki is a chill beach resort town known for its unique magnetic sands that are all about health and wellness. These sands have been getting attention for their healing powers since the 1800s, helping people tackle various health issues. Ureki's magnetic sand is packed with minerals like magnetite and quartz. It's got an unusual magnetic content of about 23%, making its magnetic field way stronger than that of regular sand. The Hessdalen Lights are mysterious glowing orbs seen in a 7-mile stretch of the Hessdalen Valley in central Norway. These lights have been popping up since at least the 1930s and can be spotted both day and night. They usually shine in bright white, yellow, or red and can hover, move quickly, or sway gently. Their appearances can last from a few seconds to over an hour. Though there were many sightings, especially between 1981 and 1984, the frequency has gone down to about 10 to 20 a year as of 2010. Various groups, like Project Hessdalen, have tried investigating these lights since 1983, using methods ranging from field studies to scientific research. As for what these lights actually are, no one really knows for sure. Some sightings have been explained away as things like car headlights or astronomical objects. One theory suggests they might come from a chemical reaction involving airborne dust from local mines. Another idea is that they could be clusters of particles interacting in a specific way due to the area's geology. Some researchers have even proposed that the lights might be a result of piezoelectricity due to certain rock types in the valley. Other theories include complex interactions between electromagnetic waves and dust, which could explain the light's unique shapes and colors. Saharan dust, which once even made its way to parts of the UK and left a red layer on cars, is full of naturally magnetic materials. On September 7, 2023, some folks noticed their cars were covered in reddish flecks because of the dust blown from the Sahara. A video making the rounds on Facebook showed someone using a magnet to lift the dust off their car. One commenter even got pretty heated, saying, "If you want to know what fell down last night, just grab a magnet and check this out," insisting it was metal, not sand. Naturally, this sparked chatter about how the dust's magnetic properties could be linked to chemtrails. But guess what? Experts are clear that magnetism is actually normal for Saharan dust. According to Professor Barbara Marr from the Center for Environmental Magnetism and Paleomagnetism at Lancaster University, the dust carries a mix of particles from the African ground and some air pollution as it heads to Europe and the UK. The red color is due to hematite, a weakly magnetic mineral. Sure, the dust can pick up some human-made magnetic particles along the way, but scientists say those are usually way less abundant than the naturally occurring ones. The whole chemtrails idea, which suggests planes are intentionally spraying harmful substances, is based on conspiracy theories that have been thoroughly debunked. In short, the presence of magnetic particles in Saharan dust, like that of hematite giving its reddish tint, doesn't back up the chemtrail theory at all. Not having the internet in 2024 seems sorta abnormal, right? When we talk about internet access, it primarily comes down to wired connections, mobile networks, and satellites. Fiber optic cables connect most of the world, except Antarctica, and many small islands. Mobile networks are also widespread. Even in remote areas like the Sahara, you might find patchy access. For people in rural spots, satellite internet is often the best bet, even if it's slower. Still, there are a few truly isolated spots left. Deep caves like Georgia's Krubera Cave are internet-free due to their depth. And under the ocean, signals struggle to get through, making internet access poor or non-existent. You rub your eyes, trying to make sense of everything. Perfect circular holes in the bottom of the ocean floor off the coast of Big Sur in California. You have no idea how this happened, even though you're a marine biologist who's been practicing it for years. You go through some of the old records and find out that these holes have been around since the 90s. In 1999, a ship-mounted sonar conducted a survey and found 5,200 of these pockmarks, or large holes over 500 square miles, on the ocean floor. They look like moon craters underwater. You contact your team and get the robot ready to go down and explore the scene and bring back a few samples. You and the team drive to the coast and hop on the boat. You're sitting inside controlling the robot with a joystick. Your teammate sets the robot in the water and drives it down. Everything seems normal near the surface, but as the robot goes lower, the pockmarks start appearing. A bunch of boats swift past you, making you lose your balance and focus. The robot turns on the flashlight so you can see better. But as it goes lower, the resolution is less crisp. It almost reaches the bottom, and the holes are smooth and nearly perfect circular shapes. Some of these holes that were visible in the sonar reading measure more than 30 feet across and 15 feet deep. You show the rest of your teammates the images, and they're shocked. The robot continues swimming, but there appear to be more holes all around. Many of them are too small for the scanner to capture from above. These microdepressions are steep and have sort of tails going in a certain direction. It's possible that the currents underwater played a role in their shape. Everywhere the robot swims, there are new holes all around. After a couple of hours, the robot goes back to the boat with some samples. You take them back to the lab and study them. The robot clearly captures images of human trash, but the samples don't indicate anything alarming for now. Despite the fact that 1/3 of the pockets are filled with trash, there's still no explanation of how they were formed. It's late at night and the rest of your team heads back home. You're passing out in the lab, still trying to find some answers. You wake up the next day, and while cooking breakfast, you get this idea that maybe these holes are gases venting out, which could be harmful to marine life. You quickly get the robot and sail out to the ocean once more. This time, you didn't even think about calling your teammates. You place the robot in the water and get behind the screen to control it. The robot descends to the bottom of the ocean and does a survey. So far, the holes still seem to be covered with trash. But some of the holes have marine life dwelling inside, like fish and seaweed. After much scanning, it doesn't look like they're producing any bubbles, which means there aren't any gases venting out, but you're determined to find them. After a while, you reach one of those large pockmarks, and the robot starts scanning around. You find some bubbles coming from a source, but the robot can't reach it. It swims around trying to find a spot, but nothing. You bring the robot back to the lab and work on it. You attach some mechanical arms on it that can lift things and move them. You bring the robot back down to the same spot, but the bubbles aren't as frequent as before. You use the arms to move some of the trash and find out that the bubbles are being produced by a group of crabs chilling next to a pile of plastic. Bingo! The bad news is, you still don't have a clue why the microdepressions and pockmarks exist. As you try to control the robot to go back to the surface, an octopus wraps its tentacles around it, pulling the robot down. You struggle with the controls and push it to maximum power, but the suctions of the octopus are too strong to break off. It's a game of tug-of-war with the octopus and your robot. It takes the robot under a pile of trash, thinking it's lunch. But you use the arms to maneuver the robot out and swim back to the surface. You go back to the lab even more confused. The robot has collected more samples for you to study. Your eye is glued to your microscope, trying to figure out what's going on, but nothing. You decide to do a carbon dating test to determine how old these holes are. After a while, you check out the results and are even more stunned than before. They show that the holes are around 400,000 years old, so it's likely that human trash wasn't the cause for all this. You pull many all-nighters trying to figure out the truth. You gather your team once more and hold a small press conference about this. You claim that this may be something we should be extremely worried about, but you still can't tell them more than what you know. With all the brain work put together, you find out that the large pockmarks haven't changed or been active for more than 50,000 years. The newer holes were most likely created by human trash settling in the bottom of the ocean floor. The marine life gathered some of this trash like plastics and discarded fishing gear and created homes for themselves. This is why around 4,500 of the holes are newer and have trash in them. But it still doesn't answer why the holes appeared in the first place. You're back to square one. The only way to see what's really going on is to clear up the trash from underwater and study them. The story makes headlines in the local community and catches the attention of a cleanup crew. You organize a trip to the ocean and begin the extraction of all the trash. Many cleanup boats arrive and everyone drops down a net to collect the trash. You send down the robot once more to make sure the nets are hitting the right spot. As most of the trash is being collected, many marine life animals scramble and try to find a way to escape. Everyone makes sure not to hurt them. After a couple of weeks, all the holes are cleared up from the trash. You do another sonar scan from the surface and can see the holes clearer than before. But you still don't have an answer for this. You do some more research trying to see if any other holes appeared around the world. On the other side of the country is a mysterious blue hole off of Florida's Gulf Coast. You catch the nearest flight to Florida and make an appointment with the scientist in charge of the expedition. Blue holes are underwater sinkholes that open below the seabed. Just like on the surface, the underwater world also has sinkholes. This one is called the Green Banana and is 150 feet below, and the hole is 435 feet deep. You dive with some special gear with the rest of the team to a barren ocean floor, and the hole is right there in front of you, looking like an oasis in the desert. You and the rest of the scientists are surprised by the diverse marine life dwelling within. Some sea turtles swim past you, and even sharks. These ones don't harm humans. Halfway through, you reach a narrow path, which makes it difficult for humans to pass through. But everyone is careful. There are corals, sponges, mollusks around the corner. You collect some samples and go back to the lab. Blue holes in general are richer in nutrients than barren lands and host plenty of unique marine life. They're quite common and don't pose any sort of threat to anyone. After making the connections, you don't think the holes off the coast of California have anything to do with blue holes. The mystery goes on. At the end of December 2021, an underwater volcano with a rather exotic name, Hunga Tonga, woke up after several years of sleeping. It did that with so much energy and strength that people heard the eruption from over 100 miles away. Then it went back to sleep. But a couple of weeks later, it woke up again with a force 7 times greater than the first time. It broke the island above it in 2 parts. The lightning storm that started because of the eruption was the most intense in recorded history. The sound waves from the eruption traveled around the planet several times. Someone even heard a loud boom from it in Alaska. And it started the first known mega tsunami since ancient times. This tsunami took the lives of 2 people as far as Peru and caused trouble for 2 fishermen in California. But that's not all. This eruption could change the weather patterns on Earth for years. You may see the first proof in the summer of 2024, which is forecast to become much wetter than usual. Scientists believe the eruption was caused by gas building up to a critical point. Different minerals, including anhydrite quartz and sulfides, were building up for several months until they blocked the flow paths and sealed the gas within Hunga Tonga. Normally, when a volcano erupts, the fumes cause a temporary cooling effect on Earth's surface. But Hunga Tonga's eruption was different. It didn't produce much fumes, but released a massive amount of water vapor, roughly equal to 60,000 Olympic swimming pools. The intense heat of the eruption turned huge amounts of seawater into steam, which then blasted high into the atmosphere. All that water vapor ended up in the stratosphere, a layer of the atmosphere that's too dry to form clouds or rain. Scientists don't have any observations of volcanic eruptions like Hunga Tonga to predict its effects on our weather patterns. They can't tell exactly how long these effects might last either. This is because the only way to measure stratospheric water vapor is with satellites, which have only been around since 1979, and there hasn't been an eruption similar to Hunga Tonga in that time. Experts from different countries started analyzing satellite data right after the Hunga Tonga eruption. They wanted to find out how long water vapor would stay in the stratosphere, where it would go, and, most importantly, what this would mean for the planet. The first big result of the eruption, at least partially, was a huge hole in the stratosphere that was hanging on for several months in 2023. By the time it appeared, the water vapor had reached the polar stratosphere over Antarctica. In the following years, there wouldn't be enough water vapor left to enlarge this hole. It looks like Hunga Tonga will have just a minimal effect on global average temperatures. But there are some surprising, lasting regional impacts. One of the scientific models forecasts colder and wetter winters for northern Australia until about 2029. In North America, it predicts warmer winters, and Scandinavia could have even colder winters. This is just one study though, and one approach to understanding how the eruption of Hunga Tonga can change our weather. We do have at least one example from history when a volcano eruption changed the world. Over 2 centuries ago, in 1815, Mount Tambora erupted and caused the year without a summer. In the following year, the winter was unusually cold and wet weather across Europe and North America. A recent study confirms that 1816 wouldn't have been this cold without the volcanic eruption. The immediate effects of the eruption were catastrophic, with tsunamis destroying homes, claiming 10,000 lives, and 80,000 more who fell ill in the aftermath. The eruption of Mount Tambora was one of the strongest in the last 1,000 years. It had ejected an enormous amount of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, which quickly spread across the world. It resulted in the coldest year in at least the last 250 years. In May, frost wiped out most of the crops in New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Vermont. By June, heavy snow covered the ground in Albany, New York, and Dennisville, Maine, and New Jersey had 5 straight nights of frost. The cold continued into late summer, which should have been the harvest season. In July, lakes and rivers were still frozen as far south as northwestern Pennsylvania, and frost stayed in Virginia until late August. Temperatures would drop from above normal summer highs to near freezing within just a few hours. The weather was completely unpredictable. Prices of food skyrocketed. The cost of oats for horses, which were the main mode of transportation, also rose sharply. Some people believe this situation inspired Carl Drees to invent the bicycle in 1817 as an alternative transportation method. Tambora changed weather patterns completely for not just 1, but 3 years. The whole planet got colder, and as crops failed, probably at least 1 million people starved. Scientists don't have solid evidence of volcano eruptions that have taken more lives than Tambora. But the Krakatoa eruption in Indonesia in 1883 is far more famous than Tambora because information about it spread worldwide via telegrams and photos. Its final blast was the loudest recorded sound in history, and people could hear it on 10% of the entire Earth's surface. The eruption started a tsunami with waves about half as tall as the Statue of Liberty. Still, it was less powerful than Tambora's eruption. The island that once hosted Krakatoa disappeared in the eruption, but new eruptions began less than 50 years later and created the Child of Krakatau cone in the center of the caldera of the old eruption. The new volcano still comes to life from time to time. Mount Vesuvius's eruption, which took down Pompeii, is one of the most well-known volcanic disasters in history. It took around 2,000 lives, much fewer than Tambora. According to a famous Roman author of that time, the eruption lasted 18 hours. Pompeii was covered by a layer of ash and pumice that was thicker than twice an average human height. The nearby coastline also changed dramatically. In today's world, the after effects of volcanic eruptions are often more dangerous than the eruption themselves. Thanks to advances in technology, we can now predict volcanic eruptions more accurately and use safety measures like evacuations and flight cancellations. But there's still a lot of risk that changes in weather patterns and drought all over the world, especially in areas like India, East Asia, and East Africa that are affected by monsoons. Volcano eruptions can also have effects you wouldn't probably expect, like the evolution of dinosaurs. These guys were once the size of cats, waiting for their time to shine. It came around 230 million years ago. This time is known as the Carnian Pluvial episode. Before it, Pangaea was a dry and arid supercontinent. But then, there were 4 major volcanic events that pumped huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Global temperatures and humidity spiked because of it. These massive eruptions most likely happened because of the Wrangellia Large Igneous Province eruption in what is now British Columbia and Alaska. This prolonged volcanic activity created the right conditions for dinosaurs to blossom and diversify. and also for the rise of other groups like modern conifers, ferns, crocodiles, turtles, insects, and early mammals. With higher temperatures and more rainfall, terrestrial plants have evolved, and humidity-loving ones have become dominant. Without those changes in the world, we could have a completely different natural history. There's some solid proof that volcanic activity has really changed the weather patterns back then. Scientists have found layers in the Earth's core that show different types of carbon. It means there were 4 massive releases of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The data on mercury and carbon together shows that the spike in mercury levels was thanks to a major volcanic event that affected the global carbon cycle, and not just local eruptions.
This tourist destination has the highest entrance price of all. It could cost you your life. Those who spend over 16 hours in the death zone, and it is the official name of the most dangerous area on Mount Everest, risk never returning home. Those who endure 48 hours there will almost certainly never see their families again. The altitude in this region is over 26,000 feet, and winds can reach speeds of 62 miles per hour, sweeping everything, including you, off their path. Only one person has stood tall in this hostile environment for 90 hours. There was a bit of cheating involved, as it was with supplemental oxygen. Yep, the precious O2 gas is extremely scarce there. Without this vital resource, the maximum time someone can survive is about 21 hours. A record set by this guy. Yeah, he was tough. He reached the Everest peak 10 times. His fastest ascent took slightly under 17 hours, but Pemba broke his record, ascending Everest in 8 hours and 10 minutes. However, these accomplishments are not feats for the average Joe. These record holders have, in a sense, won a genetic lottery. Both are Nepalese Sherpas, hence the names. Sherpas are native to the mountains and have evolved a natural resistance to high-altitude living. Despite the undeniable dangers, people seem unwilling to stop visiting the death zone. Since the establishment of climbing records, over 300 people have lost their lives there. Last year alone, 18 people perished, and as of July 2024, the death zone has claimed 8 lives. Now, as creepy as it may sound, the death zone on Mount Everest resembles a graveyard. The challenge lies in that of recovering a body from this perilous location costs families a fortune. Oxygen alone, which is necessary to descend a body, can amount to as much as 20 grand. This may seem far-fetched, but the operation requires 12 people, each needing an oxygen cylinder that costs around $400. So, do the math. And it's not just the oxygen. Imagine the other expenses summed up. Still, it's not only the money. The retrieval process is fraught with danger for those tasked with it, causing many private companies to decline such requests. Recently, authorities managed to recover 4 bodies and a skeleton from the treacherous area. While not all of them have been identified, one body belonged to an individual who passed away in 2017, remaining in the death zone for 7 years. El Caminito del Rey in Spain, Maluga, may look like child's play compared to Everest death zone, as reportedly it has only claimed 6 lives. But still, this is eerie. Imagine you're standing on an old piece of wood some people dare to call a walkway that seems to be about to fall apart. You can't really move freely on it, as it's just 3 feet wide, and if you look down, you'll see nothing but a river 330 feet below you. You may want to sarcastically call it an engineering wonder, but in reality, it really is. Look, it seems like this walkway was glued to the side of a cliff. The tools and technique used to build it were quite rudimentary and unsafe, which is not surprising. The pathway is over a century old. If you're wondering how it was built without any machinery we have today, let me explain. The poor builders just hung off the side of the mountain using ropes. It's obvious no one wanted to work on that project, so prisoners who had received the death penalty were invited to participate. In exchange, they could get a reduction in their sentences, if they made it out alive, of course. Now, originally, the walkway was built to connect workers at the hydroelectric power plants by some local waterfalls. You know, just a little bridge to help them cross while transporting materials and keeping things in check at the channel. The construction kicked off in 1901 and wrapped up by 1905. The walkway was famously crossed by King Alfonso XIII in 1921 during the inauguration of a dam. This pathway has seen some rough times by the early 2000s and was partly closed for over a decade. 4 years of renovations and €9 million later, it burst back onto the scene in 2015. It has gained a reputation as the world's most dangerous walkway due to a couple of tragic accidents in the late 90s. Now, you can stroll along a 1.8-mile path that hugs the edge of the gorge. Hey, remember I told you this Caminito only took 6 lives? Forget it. Nobody knows how much it really was. Alright, the next cliff destination may seem totally safe at first glance, but it's all about a very particular activity performed there. It's definitely not as high up in the sky as El Caminito del Rey, only soaring 89 feet, but this cliff is meant to jump from, and people actually do that. Now, if you were to take a watermelon and give it a dramatic drop into the water below, you'd end up with a spectacular crimson splash of watermelon juice, looking like a crime scene. It would plummet at a wild speed of 53 miles per hour, and it begs the question, can a human handle that kind of dive? Spoiler alert, absolutely. Welcome to Red Bull Cliff Diving, where brave athletes take the plunge from heights equivalent to an 8-story building. But before you think about trying this for kicks, let me tell you, it takes serious fitness to pull it off. The better your shape is, the better your dive, but it's also all about your peepers. Your eyes become your ultimate navigation system as you make that fearless leap. Fearless? The impact is no joke. If you dare to jump, you'll feel around 5 G-force on impact. For comparison, when you're on a commercial flight, even during the craziest turbulence, you rarely feel more than 1.3 G-force. But when you dive from a cliff, your heart's working overtime, and that 5 G-force can leave you lightheaded in no time. Your brain starts to feel a bit oxygen-starved, and before you know it, you could black out in a few seconds. All that blood suddenly rushes to your head, your face puffs up, and your lower eyelids practically cover your eyes. This phenomenon is called red-out, because all you see is a bright glow through those squeezed-shut eyelids. Yeah, that sounds like fun. Now, unlike all those cliffs, this place is pretty accessible, and is popular among freedivers for having little current, which is good when you go in depth. However, despite all those seemingly nice aspects of the Blue Hole in Egypt, this place has taken around 200 lives in recent years. Now, to be honest, technically, the Blue Hole is a complete average dive spot. There's nothing extraordinary that would make it more dangerous than any other spot in the Red Sea. However, diving through the arch at the Blue Hole is no joke. It's a tricky submerged tunnel that has seen its fair share of accidents. While there's no official count of how many have lost their lives here, one source estimates that around 130 divers perished there between 1997 and 2012. That's more than 8 each year. Some say the number could be as high as 200, including a few snorkel-related accidents not tied to the arch dive. To help keep things safe, Egyptian authorities placed a police officer at the Blue Hole who make sure divers are with certified guides who know the ropes. Now, the arch itself sits 170 feet down, which means you really need to know what you're doing and have the right gear, since recreational divers usually max out at around 100 feet or so. For experienced technical divers, it's mostly manageable. The real challenge is keeping track of your air in your tank, because if you mess up and take too long down there, you're going to need more than one tank of air to get through safely. If the gas isn't planned out right, you could find yourself short on air when you need to do your decompression stops, or even worse, you can run out of it completely. And, that would be bad. You come to sunny California and go for a hike in the San Lucia Mountains. There, you have a strange, unpleasant feeling, as if someone's watching you. You look around but don't see a single soul. That's when you glance at the tops of distant mountains in front of you and your heart skips a beat. Up on the peaks, you can see the outline of a giant humanoid figure, arms stretched out with a magnificent full rainbow circling it. This mysterious figure is dressed in all black. You can't make out any facial expressions or detail, but you can see it moving. Then it vanishes right before your eyes. Congrats! You've just witnessed the Dark Watchers, a phenomenon that's been terrifying hikers in the California mountains for over 300 years. Even now, scientists can't give an exact explanation for this mysterious appearance. What we do know is it's completely natural, probably. One theory claims that there are no silhouettes at all. The human brain just thinks up images created by shadows the clouds cast on the mountains. Over the centuries, people share stories about this legend, and their minds begin to show it, building recognizable objects. The same can happen to you, like when you see the contours of a human face on a burnt piece of toast or the shape of a dog in a passing cloud. The most accepted scientific explanation is what's called a Bakken specter. It's when sunlight gets bent by drops of fog or clouds. That explains the rainbow surrounding these figures. As for the shadow, it's only your own being stretched and projected on the mountains before you. After all, these figures usually show up when the sun is behind the witness. Natural or not, the vanishing mysterious figures scared the wits out of you. So we head to Antarctica. Snow, ice, and more blinding sun. Yep, it's a desert too. The light is almost blinding. You squint and off in the distance, you see something red sticking out from all the surrounding endless white. As you get closer, you realize it's a waterfall, an ominous red cascade flowing from the glacier. Splashes fly in all directions and stain the white snow. Don't worry, these so-called blood falls are nothing of the sort. Millions of years ago, hey, I wasn't around then, a glacier formed over a pond and blocked access to sunlight, heat, and oxygen. Then the pond managed to break through the glacier with a little trickle of water. When such salty waters with high levels of iron meets oxygen, it creates that scarlet rust color. This is the only waterfall of its kind in the world. As soon as you come to the Namib Desert, you immediately notice something very strange. Sprinkled among the dry grasslands are almost perfect circles of dirt where nothing grows. These massive polka dots are called fairy circles, and, you guessed it, nobody really knows what causes them. The likely culprit is termites eating the grass around their underground colony. That could also explain the circles' differing sizes. The bugs continue to eat as the colony expands outwards, but they stop before they encroach on a neighboring colony. Well, that's neighborly. The patches where you do see grass show a sort of boundary separating different termite populations. So goes the theory. Heading down to Australia's Lake Hillier. Your eyes don't deceive you. Yes, that lake is bubblegum pink and is perfectly safe to swim in. The giant pink puddle is a salt lake, and it's not the only one of its kind in the world. Salt lakes are pink because of a kind of algae and other microorganisms living in them. They produce a red pigment to protect themselves from the sun. What's unique about Lake Hillier, though, is the water is still pink even if you scoop it up into a glass, and it remains bright pink all year round. The same can't be said about other pink lakes. Southeast Asia. You see a tree that looks as if someone poured paint all over it. But the rainbow eucalyptus was painted by nature. Its unusual bark changes colors over time, like a kaleidoscope. It starts off as a bright green shade, then red, orange, purple, and finally brown. Then the colorful cycle starts again. Blood rain looks more terrifying than any horror movie, but in reality, there's nothing strange or unnatural about this weather phenomenon. People have known about such scarlet-tinted rains since the times of ancient Rome. Sometimes, powerful winds lift red dust into the atmosphere and carry it far, far away, to another galaxy. In the end, this dust gets mixed with clouds, which colors the rain. By the way, dust from coal mines can make the rain black. Pollen is responsible for yellow rains, and some other kinds of dust can turn rainwater white. Back in 2009, people in Ishikawa, Japan saw a kind of rain no one's ever seen before. It was raining tadpoles. The first reason was that the wind that day was so strong it lifted and carried all those tadpoles away in no time. The second possible reason was that big birds such as gulls just dropped them while they were flying to their nests. Some scientists believe these creatures were hauled off the ground by a waterspout and rained down later. By the way, that day people found not only tadpoles, but also frogs and fish instead of puddles. And yep, it can be raining worms too. Some people claim they've seen snake rains. Yikes! And instead of common raindrops, people have watched translucent jelly-like blobs falling down from the skies. Now, Australian spiders are notorious, and to frighten people, they've even learned how to rain. Spider rains are a pretty common thing in Australia because of ballooning. They climb up trees, then spin strands of silk, and that's why the wind can carry them away. Usually people don't notice it, but when it's wet, hundreds of spiders climb up to more desirable places. People say that when it rains or snows, it's possible to see spiders literally drift down on those webs as if they were balloons. If you ever travel to the Mekong River, you'll probably have a chance to see glowing balls rising up from the water and beelining straight into the air. The locals call these the Naga Fireballs. Sizes may vary, so these reddish balls can be as tiny as a cherry and as large as a watermelon. During the night, you can see dozens and sometimes even thousands of fireballs. Scientists don't have any solid explanation why it happens, but it's probably flammable gas released by the marshy environment. Still, a local superstition claims it's all because of a giant serpent living in the Mekong. Now, shelf clouds look like something from a sci-fi movie. They form when warm and moist air gets caught in a thunderstorm updraft. These ominous clouds most often mean a storm is coming. Breathtaking rainbow clouds appear on top of cotton-like puffy clouds after thunderstorms. The puffy clouds are low-altitude ones. When the water vapor they contain condenses, the resulting droplets act like prisms. This forms multicolored caps over the clouds. Morning glory clouds are extremely rare. They look like massive tubes stretching across the sky. Most researchers agree that these clouds appear when an updraft squeezes through the cloud. This creates the signature rolling appearance. The cool air at the back of the cloud makes it sink downward. The best, but not the only place to see morning glory is Australia's Gulf of Carpentaria. If you decide to travel there to see these clouds, choose a period from late September or October to early November. Huge white lumps over your head are called mammatus clouds. They make you believe the sky is falling. Most clouds form when air rises in the atmosphere, but not mammatus ones. They appear when moist and cool air goes down and mixes with dry air. The result? Unique puffed rice clouds. By the way, if you spot this phenomenon, bad weather is just around the corner. Whoa, mama! If you get to the bottom of the Caribbean just off the coast of Cuba, you'll see circular columns, paved floors, symmetrical stone structures. That's what the Cuban underwater city looks like. Why was a large city abandoned? Lots of people believe the ruins once belonged to a long-forgotten civilization. But scientists have their doubts. They claim the lost city is nothing but a natural phenomenon that appeared about 5 million years ago. Such disc and donut structures often occur around the areas of the seafloor where natural gases break free. Those who have ever heard an annoying sound a kettle makes when the water is boiling can imagine what the whistle sounds like. Even though this noise isn't as blood-curdling as some other unexplained sounds, it doesn't make the whistle any less mysterious. It's incredibly elusive. In 1997, only one underwater microphone was able to pick it up. At that time, researchers didn't manage to pinpoint the source of the noise. The most likely cause of the unusual sound is the eruption of one of the submarine volcanoes. But once again, there's not enough proof to make sure.
Humans are at the top of the food chain, but despite this, some creatures cause us a lot of trouble, and we can't do anything about them. Look at these flies with red eyes and blue-green bodies. These are some farmers' worst nightmare in the United States of America. Meet the New World Screwworm Flies. These little troublemakers have been munching on livestock from Florida to California for centuries, racking up some serious damage to the agricultural scene. To combat these pesky flies, the U.S. Department of Agriculture dropped a whopping 15 million sterile screwworm larvae from helicopters along the Panama-Colombia border. There's even a factory in Panama cranking out these sterile larvae like it's factory-fresh fruit. This action sounds weird, but it makes a lot of sense. The thing is, female flies only get one shot at mating in their entire lives. So if they happen to mate with a sterile dude, that's it. No offspring, ever. This clever trick means healthy screwworms can't reproduce when surrounded by sterile pals, which keeps their numbers in check. But how do we make these male flies sterile in the first place? Simple. A little radiation zap does the trick. You throw a bunch of flies in a lab, give them a quick spin through an X-ray machine, and then drop them from a helicopter into the wild, where their relatives are hanging out. If screwworms start making a comeback, inspectors hop on ATVs and cruise thousands of miles to hunt down any infected animals and stop the spread. There's no magic trick to wipe out these parasites completely, but the game plan is clear. Keep the sterile fly drops coming and stay one step ahead of these pesky little critters. Do you know why it's too dangerous to move animals from one habitat to another? There's a possibility that they won't encounter predators in the new area and will become an invasive species that will provoke an ecological disaster. Here's a simple example. In the 30s in the 20th century, farmers from Australia faced a serious problem. Cane beetles were spoiling sugarcane in the northern part of the country. Insects devoured a huge amount of the harvest, and people couldn't stop it. They didn't want to spoil the cane with poisonous pesticides, so they brought a group of cane toads from South America in the hope that the toads would eat the pests. But when these toads found themselves in the reed fields, they couldn't reach the bugs, as they lived on tall reeds. The toads just couldn't jump at such height and get the pests. So instead of beetles, they began to eat other insects. Amphibians started multiplying at a tremendous rate. The female cane toad can lay about 30,000 eggs at a time. After 3 days, small tadpoles hatch from the eggs. They swim in the water for 20 weeks and then turn into grown-up toads that live from 5 to 10 years. Millions of jumping animals began taking over the entire northern part of the continent, destroying all the biodiversity around. Leaves, grass, insects, carrion. Toads ate all this and didn't leave food for other animals. The problem was that the toads turned out to be very hardy creatures. Heat, cold, rain, droughts, they can breed anywhere and nothing can stop them. But what about other animals? Australia is full of alligators, big birds, and other creatures that would love to feast on croaking amphibians. Yes, it's true. But any animal that tried to eat these toads didn't survive. The problem is that cane toads are venomous. There are special glands behind their eyes that produce strong toxins that cause serious health problems in any animal. Some farmers saw birds falling from the sky after they had swallowed these amphibians. More than 80 years have passed since farmers brought 100 cane toads to Australia. Now, there are about 1.5 billion of them. They have already covered 386,000 square miles, which is about the same area as the states of Texas and Oklahoma combined. And so far, scientists and biologists haven't come up with an effective way to deal with them. People tried to catch them, but it was useless. Even if you catch 98 toads out of 100 next to a small pond, the 2 remaining toads can produce 30,000 eggs per night. Nature may be able to restore balance when some animals with immunity to toad toxins appear in Australia. But at the moment, cane toads are unstoppable. How can we stop the uncontrolled population of mosquitoes that are dangerous to humans? The correct answer is to create 735 million genetically modified mosquitoes and mix these 2 groups. All over the world, many species of mosquitoes carry infections that cause serious health problems to humans. Almost no one likes mosquitoes. These buzzing insects prevent us from sleeping, and their bites are incredibly itchy. Many people would probably be happy if these creatures disappeared from the face of the Earth. And scientists might have found a way to make this wish come true. Only female mosquitoes bite us because they need food to produce eggs. So, scientists released genetically modified male mosquitoes with a special protein in their bodies. After two mosquitoes come into contact, this protein is transmitted from the male to the female and then prevents it from producing offspring. All this happens before the age when females begin to bite. So, females can't create offspring, which means they don't need to bite people and animals anymore. And the more of such proteins scientists spread, the smaller the mosquito population will be. It sounds good, but about 240,000 people have signed a petition to cancel this experiment. Many scientists believe that the disappearance of one insect species can lead to a biological catastrophe. Nature is a complex, balanced system where the slightest change can lead to serious problems. Mosquitoes are a food source for many reptiles and amphibians. The extinction of mosquitoes can trigger the disappearance of many species. It's like a chain reaction of catastrophes, the end of which is unknown. Nevertheless, modified mosquitoes have already been released in Florida, and it seems that nothing terrible has happened. The good news is that people have fewer health problems after that. Moreover, since 2019, about 1.5 billion mosquitoes have been released worldwide. It has saved millions of lives and hasn't disrupted the delicate balance of nature yet. Recently, scientists have released another group of safe mosquitoes in East Africa. Well, let's hope that scientists have everything under control. Invasive species are not always mosquitoes, flies, or amphibians. These can also be large animals, such as feral pigs or super pigs. These pigs are a mix of domestic swine and wild boar. There are already almost 7 million feral hogs in the south of the USA. Thanks to people's efforts, these animals haven't spread to the north yet. But the danger to the northern states comes from Canada. Pigs were brought there in the 80s to support agriculture. But in the early 2000s, wild boars lost their popularity. They just stayed in the wild, and farmers were sure that those animals wouldn't survive the harsh Canadian winter. Oh, how wrong they were. Wild pigs turned out to be hardy, mobile, and capable of rapid reproduction. These animals dig and tear up the ground, eat almost everything they come across, and thus take food from other animals. By the way, other creatures can become their lunch too. Wild pigs attack mice, geese, ducks, and some species of deer. They trample crops, grass, and flowers and are not afraid of anything. They're like natural bulldozers. Any farm is in danger of extinction if it's in the path of thousands of super pigs. And people can't do anything with them. The northern states understand that an invasion is imminent, so they're preparing for a long battle. Super pigs love swampy areas with tall grass. Canadian and American farmers will try to drive them into more open areas and fence those places off. The plan is not perfect, but it can slow the pigs down and save some time. People went outside and stopped in wonder. Some gooey stuff was covering the ground. Whitish, gelatinous blobs had turned the outside world into a scene out of a creepy sci-fi movie. This mystery evoked lots of discussion, and experts offered different theories. But it turned out that the situation was even worse than previously thought. The blobs reportedly made the people who came into contact with them sick. But let's start from the very beginning. It was the summer of 1994 in the timber town of Oakville when gelatinous blobs were found on the ground. People thought they had rained from the sky because where else could they have come from? This find caused panic and confusion among the residents of the area. But actually, it was just the first appearance of this gooey substance. Flecks of goo, which were actually smaller than a grain of rice, fell down from the sky several times. The volume was very high, and when they accumulated on the ground and shed roofs, they became visible. Around 10 days after the first occurrence, a newspaper wrote an article about the blobs. Other than that, there seem to be no other confirmed and official reports about this mysterious substance. Until a National Weather Service employee in the area got a call from an unidentified man in August. The man claimed that some hot, metallic particles falling from the sky had burned holes in his kid's trampoline. Apparently, it was time to examine the Oakville Blobs. A hospital reportedly looked at them under a microscope and made a terrifying discovery. The researchers stated that the substance contained human white cells. This encouraged some people to suppose that the blobs were probably concentrated fluid waste from an airplane toilet. This theory was debunked after a spokesperson of the Federal Aviation Administration explained that toilet fluids were usually dyed blue, which gave them the nickname blue ice. Another theory trying to explain the Oakville Blobs suggested they had something to do with jellyfish. Some experts agreed that this idea was plausible. Something the size of portions of jellyfish could have been pulled up into the atmosphere and moved to another location during a storm. After all, raining animals is nothing new, but we'll speak about that later. At the same time, 6 events of the Oakville Blobs raining down from the sky were reported, which made it hard to imagine jellyfish particles floating around in the sky for so long. On the 20th of August 1994, the New York Times reported that the mysterious gooey substance had once been alive. This article followed an analysis made by the Washington State Department of Ecology. The scientists who had tested the blobs announced that they had found out that the substance contained a number of cells of different sizes. Interestingly, those results brought an end to the human white cell theory since it turned out that the cells didn't have any nuclei. But that's something you definitely see in human white cells and jellyfish as well. These creatures are multicellular organisms whose cells contain nuclei. But what kind of life wouldn't have nuclei? For example, bacteria and some other microorganisms similar to them. An expert working on this mystery said that the blobs had no clearly visible structure, and it didn't appear even when they used a microscope. In the end, the researchers concluded that the substance contained 2 types of bacteria, both found in the digestive tracts of humans and other mammals. They were also often found when waste was deposited. These bacteria could travel in the water and through the air. The goo could be some kind of a carrier system. Unfortunately, the scientists admitted that they didn't have any hard evidence to support their idea. To add to the mystery, the samples reportedly went missing before the researchers could finish their work. But is it true that the weird blobs made people sick? At first sight, yes. A few Oakville residents reported becoming ill and experiencing similar flu-like symptoms after touching the Oakville Blobs. But was it a direct consequence? No one knows. Experts admit that the cases of illness could have been a coincidence, which makes the incident even more intriguing. So far, the mystery remains unsolved. Now let's move on to the other stuff falling from the sky. Bad news. Some of it can be totally disgusting. Like worms falling from the sky in China and wiggling on people's cars. Some people thought it was an animal rain, while others were not convinced. They stated that the video was fake since the worms were only on vehicles but not on the ground. Others were sure worm rains were a totally normal thing in March. Ugh, luckily not where I live. But the most shocking thing? Bizarre worm rains happened in the British Isles too. For example, in Scotland, kids were playing soccer when worms started raining down. The reason could be a substantial weather change, or who knows what. But the cases of animal rain actually started long ago. In 1877, an unusual tornado hit a farm in Southern California, bringing along several tiny alligators about 1 foot in length. In 1894, a tornado moved through England, dropping poisonous jellyfish on people's heads. Even though some witnesses claimed those were not jellyfish but tadpoles, the incident was still extremely strange. In 1876, in Kentucky, black humor rain was recorded. That was when chunks of meat fell from the sky. Now, let me tell you, if you're squeamish, you might want to skip this part. Okay, I've warned you. Locals claimed the meat tasted like mutton, but later, researchers discovered that buzzards flying over the area must have felt unwell and regurgitated their meal right in the air. Ew, told ya. All these are instances of the animal rain, a rare meteorological phenomenon in which flightless animals fall from the sky. Such cases have been reported throughout history, starting from 1794, when French soldiers saw toads fall to the ground during heavy rain near the French city of Lille. How do such rains occur? It might be different for different species. For example, frogs and toads often roam the countryside in large numbers. Powerful winds can pick them up and carry them for great distances. Or let's take fish. In 1861, there was a reported rain of fish in Singapore. And a naturalist speculated at that time a migration of walking catfish could be taking place. So the wind might have dragged them over land from one puddle to another, as if they had been following the rain. In any case, the most common explanation of such cases is that there is no actual falling at all. Animals are just driven along by winds or something of the kind. This can also explain why typically only one single species of animal is reported raining from the sky. Another probable explanation involves tornado waterspouts. Those are tornadoes forming over the water. A tornadic waterspout can potentially transport animals to relatively high altitudes and carry them to remote locations. This idea is supported by the suggestion that animal rains are often preceded by storms. At the same time, this theory doesn't explain why each incident involves just one species, not a group of similarly sized animals from the same habitat. Here are some other examples of animal rains. In 1947, fish started falling to the ground in Louisiana. And in 2005, it rained frogs in Serbia. In 2010, a small town in Australia experienced a rain of perches. These occurrences were most likely caused by tornadoes, lifting things from the ground and water and depositing them in totally different areas. Sometimes, even iguanas might fall onto your head. When it's really cold, they go into hibernation mode to survive. But even though they might look frozen, they're still alive. When it gets warmer, they start moving again. But unfortunately, while in that chilled state, they might fall down from trees, which is dangerous both for the animals themselves and for passers-by. When you mention your plans to travel to Tristan da Cunha, the chances are your friends won't even know where this remote island is located. No wonder. Tristan da Cunha is considered the most remote inhabited archipelago in the world, with the nearest populated land, St. Helena, around 1,500 miles away. There are only 229 people living on Tristan da Cunha now. In such a close-knit community, everyone is someone's cousin, uncle, or maybe just a friend, but everyone knows each other for sure. There are as few as 10 last names on the island, representing just 10 families. Getting there is quite an adventure. There are no airports on the island, which means your journey will be primarily by sea. Typically, it requires a days-long voyage from South Africa. Only 3 ships regularly service the island, with fewer than a dozen trips each year. Some cruise lines may include it in their itineraries, but travel arrangements must be made well in advance, due to limited berths available on the ship from Cape Town. And you'll also need landing permission. While Tristan doesn't have traditional hotels, there are several guest houses, and you might also have the chance to stay with a local family. They will provide you with a place to sleep, 3 meals a day, and laundry services. 88% of what you pay goes directly to the island family, and only 12% is tax. By the way, the accommodation is surprisingly affordable. It was around £65 for a full board in 2024. Yep, they do use sterling, being a part of overseas British territory. But there's also this local currency called St. Helena Pound, used at parity with sterlings. By the way, it's only been around 80 years since the island started using actual money. In 1942, the naval station began paying cash wages, and it helped Tristan Islanders to move from a barter economy to a cash-based system, and allowed them the novelty of making their first cash purchases. Just a heads up. Pack everything you might need before you go, as you definitely won't come across Walmart there. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a supermarket and all, but it's just not the way you're used to, with endless shelves displaying endless oversized mayo jars. Tristan's Island store, often referred to as the supermarket, lacks plate glass windows and flashy advertisements, and let's be honest, it looks like an abandoned barn from the outside. Still, it plays a crucial role in providing essential goods to complement locally produced foods and woolens. If a resident wants to buy something, they must place orders months in advance for items that arrive with incoming ships. The store operates Monday through Friday. Today, the islanders continue to cultivate their own crops and raise livestock. The supermarket has become a vital source for other essentials like flour, sugar, and a variety of groceries including frozen bread and products typical of the UK or South African supermarkets. And even though the island's economy relies heavily on fishing, especially rock lobsters, islanders are largely self-sufficient. Let's move to another destination that's super hard to reach, but this time it's a level up in difficulty. I'm talking about the notorious Hypoxia City, the place with the smallest amount of oxygen on the planet. Sure thing, it's a nickname. The real name is La Rinconada. This place is located in Peru. Getting there means climbing over 16,000 feet up into the mountains. And what did you expect from the highest city on Earth? Despite its hard-to-reach location, it houses way more people than Tristan da Cunha, between 30,000 and 50,000. And while the island in the middle of nowhere looks idyllic, the Peruvian city of La Rinconada has very different looks. The urban layout features predominantly low-rise residences, where essential services are limited. La Rinconada is without a reliable supply of running water and lacks a sewage system. The community does not have a waste collection service, which forces residents to either burn or bury their garbage. Moreover, up until the early 2000s, La Rinconada did not have access to electricity. Most things, including the most essential foods, must be brought here from outside. Despite originally being a miner city, right now it has a wider range of activities to make your living. Some people are busy with trading, food, clothes, you name it. Others provide services, and some people even open public restrooms. Architectural-wise, La Rinconada has very little to offer. The pattern is quite predictable. Huts made from corrugated metal that are unstable and rusting. The choice of materials is dictated by practicality. These metal sheets are the lightest and easiest for miners to transport to the glacier. Unfortunately, the homes lack proper insulation, leaving residents shivering in the cold even though they have access to wool from local sheep, which is an excellent insulator. Sturdier rock homes exist but are rare, typically inhabited by wealthier miners. While the architecture might not be particularly captivating, the vistas certainly are. In nearly every spot in La Rinconada, a glance upward reveals La Bella Durmiente, or Sleeping Beauty, a massive glacier towering over the town. Getting to La Rinconada is very hard. First, you'll need to fly into Alejandro Velasco Astete International Airport in Cusco, Peru. Once you're in Cusco, you can catch a train or a bus to Puno, which is right by Lake Titicaca. Here's where it gets a bit tricky. The only way to really get up to La Rinconada is by hitchhiking or finding a ride into the mountains. There might be some buses, but they don't run on a set schedule. If you're up for it, you can rent a car, but be warned, the roads can be pretty rough and tricky to navigate. So a little extra caution goes a long way on this adventure. Unlike Tristan da Cunha, where they adopted cashback in the 1940s, La Rinconada doesn't rely much on it. The economy of this place is based mainly on gold mines. The mines are unguarded, unregulated, and often dangerous. Miners work for 30 days under a cachorreo system, where on the 31st day, they're allowed to take as much ore from the mine as they can carry as a form of payment. La Rinconada has no bank, but it has many storefront fund transfer agencies, which miners use to wire money to their families. Still, they never know how much they're gonna send. Our next destination is Svalbard, a place that might seem unwelcoming due to its climate. But locals embrace everyone with open arms. No visa is required if you want to visit or even work there. Located near the top of the world, Svalbard offers a unique and remote charm. The capital, Longyearbyen, is home to a fascinatingly diverse community, with over 50 nationalities represented among its 2,400 residents. You might even spot a polar bear wandering into town on occasion. The living space is compact. There's just one grocery store, and the streets are numbered instead of named, adding to the town's distinctive feel. Longyearbyen also boasts a university center with around 300 students. Interestingly, every student must learn to use firearms for safety in the surrounding wilderness. Originally, it was founded as a mining town, just like La Riconada, but the focus has shifted mainly to tourism. However, a quirky tradition remains from its mining days. Visitors and residents alike take off their shoes when entering hotels and restaurants, a practice born out of the need to keep coal dust at bay. The last destination for today is Palmerston Island, a remote coral atoll in the Cook Islands, located about 290 miles northwest of Rarotonga. Famous traveler James Cook visited it on June 16, 1774, and the place was uninhabited at the time, despite ancient graves found there. Today, the island supports a small population of just 25 residents, primarily descendants of 19th century English sailor William Marsters. Marsters arrived in 1863 with 2 Polynesian wives and later added a third. He fathered 23 children. Fishing is the mainstay of the local economy, resembling subsistence living due to the island's isolation. Modern amenities and communication services are available. Although there's no airport, cargo ships visit periodically. It was June 1928 when Mr. Keller almost lost his life in a terrifying natural disaster. He was outside with his family when he noticed an umbrella-shaped cloud that seemed to be approaching them. It gave him a sense of foreboding. A tornado was probably forming there. Indeed, in no time, 3 huge funnel clouds were dashing their way. After rushing his family into the storm cellar, Keller decided to have another look, and what he saw both terrified and mesmerized him. The twister was directly overhead, but inside the swirling cloud, everything was eerily still. The man could feel a strong, grassy smell. He had trouble breathing. He looked up and saw a circular opening right overhead. It was around 50 to 100 feet across and around half a mile high. Keller could clearly see the walls of the rotating cloud. Constant bursts of lightning zigzagged from side to side non-stop, illuminating this horror movie scene. The man could also see many smaller tornadoes forming and breaking free. A deafening, hissing noise was overwhelming. And the next moment, the tornado skipped over Keller's house and smashed the home of his neighbors. Mr. Keller wasn't the only person to see the tornado from the inside and live to tell the tale. But other survivors didn't end up as unscathed. It seemed to be a regular day when Chris Tuving from Dallas, Texas got to the Little Caesars in 2019. They had run out of pizzas, so he decided to wait. Well, it was a grave mistake. A powerful tornado hit the shopping mall where he was staying and pulled him out of the building. Chris managed to find a support column and held on for dear life. But no muscle strength could compare to the terrifying power of the tornado. Tuvang was lifted into the air and thrown into a truck parked in front of the restaurant. He tried to hold on to the hood, but there was nothing to grab. In the end, he managed to hold on to the rim of the left front tire and stay there until the whole nightmare stopped. The tornado Chris survived had sustained winds of 140 miles per hour and was 13 football fields wide at the base. Eric Simmons recalled taking cover from a tornado in May 2019 by climbing into his truck. Once inside, he looked out of his right windshield and saw vines growing along the fence. They were moving around in a bizarre way that confused the man. And then it all started. Suddenly, everything Eric could see was wind and pitch-black darkness. Then, a section of a roof flew over him and shredded apart mid-air. The truck's back windshield shattered, showering the man with shards of glass. A tree in front of him was lifted into the air like a twig, and the fence blew over the top of the truck. Simmons could feel the back of the vehicle lifting. He could see the power lines exploding right in front of his eyes. Even though the visibility was terrible, he could still see the flashes. It all lasted around 45 seconds, but to him, an eternity seemed to have passed. When the coast grew clear, Eric got out of the car, but he could barely walk after the shock he had lived through. He couldn't speak. It was one of the most horrifying and traumatic experiences of his life. According to the man, the real reason why he was so terrified was because he had no training, no warning, and no defense against whatever was coming. Later, he found out that the tornado had almost taken his life at a speed of 86 to 110 miles per hour and was around 75 to 100 yards across. A tornado is a rotating column of air that touches the ground. Sometimes it's connected to the base of a thunderstorm. The wind speeds inside tornadoes can top hundreds of miles an hour. No wonder they have enormously devastating potential, picking up objects, unrooting trees, destroying buildings, you name it. The problem with escaping a tornado is that it's not always easy to see. The wind, however severe it is invisible. The first sign of an approaching tornado might be the infamous rumble resembling the noise a moving freight train produces. There are also some other sounds indicating that a tornado is coming, but the human ear can't perceive those. When you spot that classic tornado cone, it means it has already developed a condensation funnel made of water, dust, and debris. The most destructive tornadoes are born from rotating thunderstorms, called supercells. Luckily, those are something meteorologists can actually notice because such storms have a well-defined appearance on radars. Experts believe that the difference in the temperature of such a storm can determine how likely a tornado is to form. And still, there's a lot we don't know about this process. For example, the question about why and where tornadoes are most likely to appear remains unanswered. The strength of tornadoes is measured with the enhanced Fujita scale. The rating goes from 0 to 5, considering the damage caused by a tornado and its wind speeds, where EF0 is the weakest tornado and EF5 is a tornado I hope you will never ever come across. The EF scale rounds off at wind speeds of 318 miles per hour, with strong frame houses being lifted off foundations and carried long distances to be eventually broken into pieces. Cars fly through the air for more than 328 feet away, and steel-reinforced structures are left badly damaged. Despite this terrifying power and ferocity of tornadoes, authorities report that even the worst of them have a 99% survival rate. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't take all possible precautions to avoid ending up inside one. Stay away from doors and windows. Move to an interior room if possible, and use pillows, blankets, and mattresses to protect yourself from flying debris. If stranded outside during a tornado, crawl into a ditch and cover yourself, protecting the head. Now, there's another twister that is as scary as a tornado, but this one forms in the water. Whirlpools appear when fast-flowing water crashes into an obstacle or another current. The water starts swirling in a downward spiral, creating a vortex that can pull objects, animals, and even small boats that happen to be nearby to the bottom. One more way for a whirlpool to form is the sudden appearance of a sinkhole created by a collapsed cave, for example. This makes water flood the hollow structure and creates a whirlpool similar to the one you see when you pull the plug out of a bath filled with water. While some whirlpools are small and brief, others can reach enormous sizes and be driven by constant currents. The most dangerous of them are maelstroms. If you get into a whirlpool like that, your chances to get back to the surface are slim. The incessant movement of the water and its pulling power can leave you disoriented and stuck without air. That's what happened to Stuart Foulstone when he got trapped in a whirlpool. His first instinct was to swim out of it, but this idea proved to be hopeless. The footage filmed by the cameraman attached to his helmet later showed that the man had been underwater for almost 3.5 minutes. He had probably been dragged all the way down to the riverbed. There, the pull of the twister lessened a bit and finally released its hold. The guy was lucky to get spotted face down in the water and pulled to the surface by a kayaker. The depth a whirlpool can pull you down to can vary. It depends on its power and size. Sadly, not everyone who got trapped in a whirlpool survived and got out again. In different ways in which whirlpools form means that sometimes they can appear out of the blue. You can't predict this process and get no warning. So the best way to stay safe is to wear your life jacket at all times when in the water. If you get pulled into a whirlpool, try not to move in the same direction as the water flow. Aim for the outer edge rather than the center of the twister. If you're lucky, the whirlpool might throw you back up. There have been precedents. And if you come over a whirlpool in a boat or kayak, do your best to stop the boat from filling with water.
There's a mysterious island that appears and disappears like magic. Just like Schrödinger's cat, this Schrödinger's island exists and doesn't exist at the same time. Officially it's called Sandy Island, and it once appeared in maps, but it was never there in real life. Australian scientists decided to solve the mystery once and for all by embarking on an adventure to find this elusive archipelago. But when they reached the coordinates, all they found was endless blue waves. It's like the island was playing a game of hide-and-seek with them. This story goes back to 1876. A whaling ship was crossing the area and reported an island. Whoever saw it said it was over 15 miles long north to south and around 3 miles wide, about the size of Manhattan, so not so tiny at all. But every time researchers went to visit the area, they found nothing. So in 1974, an official mission from New Caledonia declared that Sandy Island was simply not a thing and excluded it from all maps. People went on with their lives until they noticed that the island was appearing on Google Earth as a black blob. In 2012, another Australian expedition went out to check out the area to get some explanations. They had to write a eulogy for the long-lost island and explain what could have created this mess. For starters, mapping technology wasn't at its peak back in the 1900s. It was easy to get the coordinates wrong. Then there was the fact that the area is big on volcanic activities. It's likely that volcanic lava cooled down and created a raft of some kind. Let's say that the whaling ship went by, saw the volcanic raft, and thought it was land from a distance. But hey, it's just a guess. Humans have ventured far and wide across the globe, and it may have seemed at some point that we discovered each and every nook of our planet. But when Mount Lico popped up on Google Earth, scientists were overcome with excitement. This hidden gem in northern Mozambique is no ordinary rainforest. It's nestled inside a volcano. Determined to confirm the existence of this mysterious forest, experts assembled a team of top-notch scientists and specialists from around the world. The journey to Mount Lico was no walk in the park, with a daunting vertical rock climb standing between them and the forest. But after 6 years of planning and preparation, they were ready for the challenge. Once they got there, they saw it was even better than they imagined. The place was like a perfectly tended garden. The forest sounded unique and different from other rainforests. There were some insanely huge caterpillars that looked dangerous. And they even found ancient pots and evidence of an untouched human ecosystem. Ooh! Terra incognita means unknown land. And one of the largest unknown territories being uncovered today is the land beneath Antarctica's ice sheets. Below the snowy surface, there is an entirely new world of canyons, waterways, and lakes, which are now being mapped. One can't help but wonder, is there really liquid water below Antarctica's frozen surface? Yep. Water can exist without freezing due to pressure. The liquid water is the result of Earth's warm interior, and that's how we get things such as Lake Vostok. Now, you can't see it, but Lake Vostok is right here. Located in East Antarctica, it lies beneath 2.5 miles of thick ice. This huge lake is about 4,800 square miles. Humans could only discover it with the help of some top-notch technologies like seismic soundings and ice-penetrating radars. According to these scientists, it's likely that the lake has been there for up to 15 million years. Bhutan is on the map for, among other things, being the happiest country in all of Asia. But it kept a hidden gem for all these years, one of the world's tallest unclimbed mountains, Kunkar Pansum. Bhutan is enmeshed in the glorious Himalayan mountains. That's why the climbing community was beyond excited when they discovered an untouched mountain. Imagine being the first person to climb an unexplored peak. That would probably guarantee you a spot in the Guinness World Records for sure. The mountain has been untouched because of a Bhutanese law. For locals, the mountain peak is a sacred site, shrouded in mystery and legends. One of their beliefs is that the sacredness of climbing a mountain lies not in reaching its peak, but in truly communing with the mountain and enjoying the process. We got to admit, that is a bit of a newsflash for Westerners. If you're ever in the state of New York, make sure you check out the Aglo General Store. You'll have to drive somewhere around the Catskills to find a beautiful, grand, big nothing. Aglo is one of America's most famous paper towns, aka a fake town. But this case is different from Sandy Island. Aglo Town never existed, and it wasn't a mistake. You see, there's an old copyright practice amongst map makers. They add in paper towns so they can know when someone is simply copy-pasting their work. What they didn't expect is that this would get completely out of hand. Some say that one day a guy picked up a map at a gas station that had Aglo Town marked in it. The person decided to open a store over there and named it Aglo General Store. Some say the guy who opened the store faced a lawsuit from the map makers. Anyways, it only lasted enough years to become a national joke. Americans drove from all over the U.S. to get a picture of the town's fake welcome sign. And then we've got Bermeja Island, located in the Gulf of Mexico. This funky island appeared on many maps of the 16th and 17th centuries. It was probably drawn by Spanish explorers. Sure, the exact location varied from map to map, and its name sometimes appeared as Bermeja, but its existence was certain enough. The Bermeja Island was last seen in a 1921 Mexican map, and then, poof, it dropped out of the horizon altogether. People started talking and wondering, did the island sink? Was it destroyed? In 2009, 3 official investigations happened to search for the island. They used high-tech technologies to scour the Mexican seabed, but Bermeja was nowhere. Researchers had multiple guesses on what it could be. Let's delve on one of these ideas. The idea was probably made up by old-day explorers to mislead their enemies in search of land and gold. Well, that seems plausible. Now, let's take a look at Rio de Janeiro. Once, the city was filled with informal territories. These places are known as slums or favelas. They're like mini-cities inside the big city. Some favelas are known to be underprivileged territories, where dwellers don't get the same urban perks as other citizens, such as the sewage system and garbage pickups. These slums grew so quickly that the government didn't have time to keep track of their developments. So today, it's usually the dwellers themselves that name the streets and make do with whatever they have at their disposal. One of the biggest slums in Brazil is located in Rio de Janeiro, the so-called Hacienda, and it was only recognized as a neighborhood by the local government in the 1990s. Our own ocean floor is less mapped than Venus, Mars, and the Moon. In fact, 95% of our oceans are unexplored. Strange, right? We do have the available technology, which is mainly sonar soundings, sending wave sounds to the ocean bed and registering what they hear back. One of the main advantages of mapping the seabed more thoroughly would be to get more insight to marine hazards such as earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions. Plus, there are so many unidentified marine life. This could give us a great insight into preservation and discovering the true dynamics of our marine ecosystems.
The concrete of gigantic construction is cracking, barely keeping thousands of tons of water under control. That's when a tiny quake shakes the ground. It becomes a game changer. The old dam gives up. An enormous amount of water dashes through the rapidly growing ruptures, pressing on the crumbling wall of stone. Another moment, and the huge dam disappears among powerful waterfalls rushing toward the village down in the valley. When a large dam hits 50 years old, it reaches its alert age. But it's basically a warning that maintaining the dam is going to get much harder, and the risk factor starts going up. A recent study by the UN Institute for Water, Environment and Health discovered that the UK and Japan have the most dams in this alert age category. No wonder. In both countries, the average dam is over 100 years old. If you, like me, are wondering why so many dams are getting old at the same time, the answer is pretty simple. Back in the middle of the 20th century, there was a massive dam building boom. In the late 1950s through the 1970s, countries built over 1,100 dams every year. But after 1990, the construction frenzy slowed down. No more than 500 new dams appeared every year, and since 2000, this number has dropped even more, to below 300. But the huge problem is that many of the dams built during that mid-century boom are all aging at the same time, and a lot of countries are facing infrastructure problems at the moment. Because what happens when these dams get too old? If they're not maintained, they're likely to start to fail, and that's a real disaster, both for water supplies and safety. It's like a ginormous water-based game of Jenga. And like in the real thing, we need to make sure those pieces don't fall. A disaster like the one we're talking about happened to the Bancha'a Dam built in 1952. This structure collapsed in 1975 after catastrophic rains from Typhoon Nina, leading to the loss of up to 240,000 lives. One of the reasons was the dam's poor design. It wasn't built to withstand extreme conditions. So, when the region faced unprecedented downpours, the dam overflowed and collapsed. I bet you're now super eager to know whether that dam near your home is going to fail. Well, if you find it on our list of the world's most dangerous dams, maybe it's time to relocate. The Hoover Dam is one of the highest dams in the USA, standing on the Colorado River at the border between Nevada and Arizona. Towering at over 726 feet, it's a stunning sight, as well as a powerhouse of energy. Its base is as thick as 2 soccer fields are long, and each spillway can handle the volume of water that flows over Niagara Falls. But experts warn that if the gigantic Hoover Dam breaks down, it'll most likely lead to catastrophic consequences, putting millions of lives at risk. The problem is, the dam is getting old. Plus, it's located in a seismically active area. The Almendra Dam is the highest dam in Spain. It was constructed between 1963 and 1970, and its main purpose is to control the flow of the river Tormes. This dam is no joke. Just a small manipulation could unleash a wave of destruction. So it's actually a serious concern for those living downstream. The Jinping Dam, often referred to as the Jinping First Cascade, is the tallest dam in the world. Its height is 1,001 feet. You'll find it in China. It was constructed to regulate the flow of the Yelong River. This structure carries immense responsibility, producing between 16 and 18 billion kilowatt hours annually. The average US household consumes about 11,000 kilowatt hours per year. It means that the energy produced by the Jinping hydropower station is enough to supply around 1.6 million households. The Kariba Dam is a colossal structure built on the Zambezi River between Zambia and Zimbabwe. Multiple authorities carry out its maintenance, but according to reports, if repairs are not conducted as soon as possible, the dam could lead to terrible destruction in the surrounding regions. It's crucial to keep an eye on this giant. The Mosul Dam is one of the most dangerous dams in the world. It's constructed of loose mud instead of concrete. This design mishap has led to ongoing erosion. The mud gets washed away by the river slowly and steadily. People work around the clock to repair and maintain the dam, but it's still a crucial site of concern. The Idukki Dam, located in Kerala, India, is a magnificent double curvature arch dam standing on the Periyar River. It's one of the highest arch dams in Asia, and it holds a huge volume of water. If a problem occurs at this dam, the consequences will be tragic for large areas. Such a disaster is likely to wipe out countless lives. So, the upkeep of the dam is crucial for everyone's safety. The Three Gorges Dam in China is one of the largest dams in the world and the world's biggest hydroelectric power station, completed in 2012. The dam is nearly 600 feet tall and stretches for 7,660 feet. That's more than half the width of Manhattan. The construction is so huge and powerful that experts say it's even had serious impacts on Earth itself. For example, affecting the rotation of our planet. However great it is, this dam poses a serious risk to the environment and safety. For one thing, it was built in an earthquake-prone area. Yikes. Plus, sediment buildup in the reservoir might make the construction less stable. Also, when they were building this dam, they had to relocate over 1 million people and significantly change the ecosystem. Famous for its beauty, the Monticello Dam in the USA attracts thousands of visitors each year. One of the reasons people are so eager to come there is its captivating glory hole. Indeed, at first sight, it may look like a picturesque feature. But in reality, this glory hole is actually a doorway to danger. It's basically a giant concrete funnel sticking up out of the dam. When the lake's surface level rises over 440 feet above sea level, which is close to overflowing the dam, the water starts draining out through the funnel as if from a bathtub. It creates a hypnotizing swirl, but you wouldn't want to get too close and get lost in the process. Nestled on the Columbia River in Washington, the Grand Coulee Dam has been powering the Pacific Northwest since 1942. It contains nearly 12 million cubic yards of concrete, which is enough to build a sidewalk 4 feet wide and 4 inches thick and wrap it twice around the equator. But this magnificent structure has some worries too. It's an aging structure, and at over 80 years old, it needs lots of TLC. It's located in a seismically active zone, which brings its stability into question. The Kurobe Dam in Japan is a stunning 610 feet tall. It was finished in 1963, so the structure is already pretty old. Japan's earthquakes makes this dam a bit nervous too. And last but not least, the area is prone to heavy rainfall. Intense rain might put extra pressure on the structure. On the Indus River, the Tarbela Dam is the largest earth-filled dam in the world. It was completed in 1976. Its issues include sediment buildup, which reduces its storage capacity. Plus, climate change has altered water flow, threatening the stability of the dam. The main reason we build dams is for irrigation. They help get water to our crops, and a whopping 40% of the food we eat around the globe depends on these big water-holding structures. Next on the list is hydropower. Dams are like giant batteries, turning flowing water into electricity. Then we have water supply, flood control, and even such fun activities as boating and fishing. But since dams are getting older, something needs to be done to protect people living close to them. The US is leading the way in something called dam removal, having taken down more than 1,200 dams in the last 30 years. Old dams are not only risky, but also expensive to maintain, so taking them down is often the smartest and cheapest move.
Octopuses have 3 hearts. 2 of them pump blood to the gills, while the bigger heart circulates blood to the rest of their body. They also have 9 brains. There's the large central one, but also each of their 8 arms has a mini brain of its own, which is why they can act independently. Since each arm has its own brain, the central brain only needs to send a higher level signal to the arm. Things like, move to that nearby crevice, there might be a crab hiding inside. In the case of humans, the brain would guide and take control of each movement of our legs and arms. And with an octopus, arms act almost independently on their way to the crevice. It also tastes and feels with the suction cups on it. Since their arms are so independent, an octopus doesn't actually know where they are unless it sees them. The human body has an ability called proprioception. Thanks to it, we know where our arm is, even if we hold it, let's say, behind our back. 1816 is known as the year when summer didn't come. In April 1815, there was a massive explosion on Mount Tambora in Indonesia. It sent enormous clouds of volcanic ash up into the atmosphere. The majority of the northern hemisphere got covered with a shroud of dust and dirt and kind of refused to settle. In June of the following year, the cold winter didn't just come to an end. Frost damaged crops and snow and rain persisted during the whole summer. In Iceland, you'll find some of the most breathtaking sceneries on our planet. Jagged mountains, fjords, hot geysers, ice fields carved into the landscape. Stunning yet intriguingly black sand beaches, such as Reynisfjara Beach. Most of the sand on beaches is generally formed from rocks that have broken down because of weather changes and erosion through thousands or even millions of years. And on Reynisfjara, the sand is a striking black color, and that's because of volcanic activity. Lava came out of an erupting volcano, got to the surface, cooled, and then hardened in the Atlantic Ocean, creating such a fascinating black hue. This beach is so magically stunning, but it's also very dangerous because of its sneakier waves. That's when a few smaller waves join together into a single, really big one. This phenomenon can happen when ocean currents force waves together, or in the case of Reynisfjara, when such waves come from an offshore underground cliff and get an even stronger pulling effect. Considering the ocean's low temperatures too, it's definitely better to just take pictures from a safe spot. Some trees talk to each other. Not the way we do, of course, but, for example, acacia trees that grow over the African savanna can warn each other if there's something dangerous coming. When some animals, such as antelopes, gobble up its leaves, the tree immediately starts producing more tannin, which is toxic to animals. They also emit a special type of gas that travels through the air and warns other trees they should protect themselves too. You're stargazing, such a chill night, and then a flash of bright light streaks through the night sky. A shooting star, so cool. But what we see is not actually a star, although we call it that way. They're meteors, which are basically small chunks of dust and rock moving through space. As they're passing through our atmosphere, they cause something called friction when one thing rubs against another, and that's why they glow. Also, the friction causes heat. Dust and rocks get extremely hot as they fly through the atmosphere, and the heat makes them glow until the moment they burn out and turn into what we call the shooting star. Sunsets in deserts are extremely beautiful because of the spectacular colors they produce a bit more than elsewhere. Sunlight consists of various shades of the color spectrum. When the sun is high in the sky, these colors mix together and our eyes see them as white. But as the sun gets lower, its rays have to go through a thicker layer of atmosphere before they get to us. The atmosphere then scatters shorter wavelengths of light, like blue and purple, before we can even see them. That's why the longer orange and red wavelengths stand out. In urban environments, air pollution can make sunset colors duller than everywhere. The clean air in deserts allow the vivid colors coming from the sun to shine through at twilight. Also, the moisture, water vapor, and rain-engorged clouds can mute the sunset's hues. Since there's no rain, clouds are thin and wispy, so they filter and reflect sunlight instead of blocking it. Bamboo grows really fast. It's actually the fastest growing plant on Earth, sometimes growing about 3 feet in just one day. You can find it in dense forests, where only a little light gets to the ground, which means bamboo is under strong pressure to reach the sunlight as quickly as it can. There's an underground stem that connects bamboo shoots to their parent plant, so the shoot doesn't really need leaves of its own until it gets to its full height. Also, bamboo grows faster than other plants because it doesn't waste its time and energy on growing rings that thicken the stalk. It's just a thin, hollow stick that grows straight up. You'll notice some of the big trees have shallow root systems, sometimes even 10 inches deep in the ground. The roots generally need access to oxygen and water, and they can mostly find it in special underground pockets called soil pores. When a tree has ideal moisture and soil conditions, it can send roots deeper down under the surface and get what it needs. But most of the time, conditions are not perfect, considering bedrock, stones, and compact soil that physically prevents the roots from going down. Such obstacles also prevent the roots from getting the needed oxygen. So, when life gets tough, the tree will take an easier option. Its roots will stay close to the surface and spread out in different directions. Drought conditions are another reason trees can have shallow root systems. By staying closer to the surface, they can take most of the rainfall collection. Plants are exposed to the sunlight most of the time, but they still don't get sunburn. They appeared on land about 700 million years ago, and one of the key things they needed to survive was something that would protect them against the ultraviolet rays coming from the sun. Those in the sea had seawater as protection. UV radiation is mostly responsible for sunburn, so land plants developed a special protein that detects it. This protein sends signals to the cells to protect the plant from the damage and effects of UV radiation. Basically, it's like they produce their own natural sunscreen, but this still doesn't mean they're 100% protected. You know that common belief that if you water plants in the midday sunshine, this can cause their sunburn? Some think droplets of water act as tiny lenses and then focus the sunlight onto the leaf surface. But they're not strong enough to actually focus sunlight from a water droplet onto the surface of a leaf. It's just that their natural sunscreen doesn't mean total protection. Too much exposure to UV radiation damages cells in the leaves and bark of the majority of plants. Earth's core is as hot as the surface of the sun. You'd think it could easily melt our entire planet, especially since the core is only 1,800 miles away from the surface. If the sun were so close, we'd be like French fries. But we're alive because the center of the sun is surrounded by a mantle of rock that's mostly solid. The crust we walk on actually floats on that mantle and protects us. If the sun was close, we'd only have empty space to protect us, and you and I wouldn't be talking. Also, to melt the entire planet, you'd need way more energy than the heat in its core. So there. The sea is kind of rough today. Nothing special, but still, you have that sinking feeling in your stomach. Call it a sense of foreboding. Something bad is going to happen, and then you hear terrified shouts. You turn around and see a giant wave, much higher than the one surrounding it. Is it a tsunami? That's true. When people think of frightening, destructive waves, tsunamis are the first thing to come to mind. But the one that is going to crash against your ship has a different nature. It's a rogue wave. Both tsunamis and rogue waves can lead to catastrophic consequences, but the difference lies in what causes these walls of water and where the destruction they bring about occurs. So, imagine a giant 60-foot-tall wave rolling over your ship. It's a miracle that the vessel doesn't sink. This massive wave, a rogue wave, seems to have appeared out of the blue, very suddenly and unexpectedly. But however mysterious, solitary, and ominous rogue waves may seem, they're actually not that rare. Now, imagine the average room in your house. The ceiling there is likely 8 feet high. A typical 2-story house is somewhere between 20 and 30 feet high. And the Statue of Liberty is 111 feet tall if we measure it from the toes to the top of the head. Now you have something to compare rogue waves with. The largest of such waves can reach a height of 50 to 90 feet. To be considered rogue, a wave must appear seemingly out of nowhere and be higher than other waves in the area. But how much higher is still under debate. Some experts think it should be at least twice as high as other large waves in the area, while others disagree. Rogue waves are also steeper than regular waves, which normally take the form of massive swells. This allows ships to maneuver up and down such waves, even when they're really high. A rogue wave, however, looks like a wall of water, and since it's steeper than other waves, it slams into a ship with enormous force, sometimes breaking over the vessel. Another reason why rogue waves are a mystery is that no one has ever filmed the formation of such a wave and followed its life cycle. There are several photos of rogue waves, but for many centuries, the only evidence of their existence was legends and stories told by sailors who survived them. Scientists are still not sure how rogue waves form, but one theory involves wave reinforcement. It happens when two waves interact and their heights get combined. So when a 15-foot wave passes over a 30-foot one, let's do the math. It results in a short-living 45-foot wave. But rogue waves can occur not only in the ocean. On November 10, 1975, on Lake Superior, a group of 3 rogue waves, also known as the Three Sisters, might have sunk the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, an American Great Lakes freighter. The ship and the crew members were lost in the catastrophe. The waves followed each other too closely, so the ship couldn't recover and shed the water from the first wave before the following one struck. The captain of a ship that was not far from the Fitzgerald reported that his vessel had been hit by 2 30 to 35-foot waves. These waves, likely followed by a third one, then moved further in the direction of the Fitzgerald and might have caused the sinking. Now, let's wave bye-bye to that, and let's move on to tsunamis. It is an extremely dangerous natural disaster. It's very different from rogue waves. In most cases, a tsunami is caused by an underwater earthquake. Usually, when a tsunami is born, it's just a few feet high. But the closer it gets to the shore, the larger it grows. Soon it enters shallow waters and starts to slow down. The first tsunami wave crashes against the shore. Its top moves faster than the bottom, and that's what makes the wave so high and steep. The lowest point of the wave gets to dry land first. In the process, it creates a vacuum effect that pulls the water away from the coast, burying the harbor and seafloor. Those who recognize this first sign of an approaching tsunami still have a chance to save their lives. 5 minutes later, an enormous wall of water hits the shore and wipes out everything in its way. But it's not just a single wave, there are many. This phenomenon is called a wave train. How fast this train is traveling depends not on how far it is from the source of the waves, but on the ocean depth. Tsunamis can move as fast as a jet plane in the middle of the ocean, but once they enter shallow waters, their speed drops. The first tsunami wave isn't usually the strongest, but lots of people don't know it and make the grave mistake that sometimes costs them their lives. After the first wave is gone, they relax and believe the danger is over. That's why the next waves, much bigger and more powerful, catch them off guard. Now, sometimes a tsunami comes as a torrent of foaming water. At other times, it makes the sea withdraw, leaving behind stranded fish and overturned boats. Also, if you spot a slight rise in sea level, it might be the sign of an approaching tsunami. The incoming water is the first tsunami wave. The second one can be even larger, and it comes sometime later. You can also notice seawater bubbling, swirling, and creating bizarre patterns. It's another sure sign a tsunami is near. Repeated wave surges can also warn you about a tsunami. If you see unusual swells coming at regular intervals, it might be time to evacuate to high ground. Surprisingly, some of the largest tsunami waves in the world were caused by landslides. For example, a landslide in Lituya Bay in Alaska formed a megawave, one of the largest ever recorded. Its height was 1,720 feet. The mega tsunami surged over the headland, washing away trees, plants, and soil down to bedrock. The wave reached more than half the height of the Burj Khalifa, the tallest construction in the world. When a third of the East Molokai volcano in Hawaii caved in and collapsed into the Pacific Ocean, it triggered a tsunami the size of one of the tallest buildings in the world, Shanghai Tower. The wave was around 2,000 feet high. Another bizarre and dangerous ocean phenomenon is square waves. They appear when two different wave patterns crash into each other at 90 degrees. It often happens near peninsulas or land where two different seas or oceans meet. This phenomenon does kind of look spectacular, but only if you're watching it from the shore. Don't even think about getting in the water to play with such waves. Cross currents in that spot can easily pull even a skilled swimmer under the water. Square waves have caused many shipping accidents over the years, too. And if you see wild, choppy waves carrying ocean debris and seaweed, stay out of the water, too. It can be a sign of a strong rip current. That can carry you far away into the ocean. And now, let me tell you about a much larger, I would even say planet-wide phenomenon called Rossby waves. There are two kinds of such waves, oceanic and atmospheric. But since we're talking about ocean waves, Slow-moving Rossby waves are totally different from ocean surface waves. They don't look like those waves that break along the shore. No, Rossby waves are giant movements of the ocean stretching horizontally across the planet. They can span hundreds of miles in a western direction and are so massive they can change the climate conditions of our planet. They contribute to high tides and even flooding in some areas all over the world. The movement of Rossby waves are complicated and depend on the location. For example, in the Pacific, waves that are closer to the equator take from a few months to a year to travel across the ocean. At the same time, waves further away from the equator often need more than 10 years to make this journey. So, as it goes by, be sure to wave.